Hello, this is Patty Young, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the April 21st issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The front page. Trump administration takes steps to refund $166 billion in tariffs. The government debuted a system to repay importers for 2 months after the Supreme Court struck down tariffs at the heart of the president's trade policy. When President Trump unveiled his sprawling global tariffs last spring, he boasted that they would generate windfall profits and make America wealthy again. But after suffering a significant Supreme Court defeat, Mr. Trump is about to pay the money back. The Trump administration on Monday took its first steps toward returning more than $166 billion collected from tariffs that were struck down in February. Just over a year after imposing many of the duties, the government began accepting requests for refunds, surrendering its prized source of revenue plus interest. For some U.S. businesses, the highly anticipated refunds could be substantial, offering critical, if belated, financial relief. Tariffs are taxes on imports, so the president's trade policies have served as a great burden for companies that rely on foreign goods. Many have had to choose whether to absorb the duties, cut other costs, or pass on the expenses to consumers. By Monday morning, those companies could begin submitting documentation to the government to recover what they paid in illegal tariffs. In a sign of the expected demand, more than 3,000 businesses, including FedEx and Costco, had already sued the Trump administration in a bid to secure their refunds before the application website launched, with some cases filed even predating the Supreme Court's ruling. But only the entities that officially paid the tariffs are eligible to recover that money. That means that the fuller universe of people affected by Mr. Trump's policies, including millions of Americans who paid higher prices for the products they bought, are not able to apply for direct relief. The extent to which consumers realize any gain hinges on whether businesses share the proceeds, something that few have publicly committed to do. Some have started to band together in class action lawsuits in the hopes of receiving a payout. Many business owners said they weren't sure how easy the tariff refund process would be, particularly given Mr. Trump's stated opposition to returning the money. The administration has suggested that it may be months before companies see any money. Adding to the uncertainty, the White House has declined to say if it might still try to return to court in a bid to halt some or all of the refunds. Malkin Khosrovian, the co-founder of Green Bar Distillery in Los Angeles, prepared for the refund process by readying documents and registering on the new government refund portal. Mr. Trump's duties had been a nightmare for his distillery, he said, which requires foreign-grown ingredients like vanilla, nutmeg, juniper berries, coffee, tea, and hibiscus. Mr. Khosrovian, a participant in We Pay the Tariffs, a coalition of small businesses that have opposed the president's policies, admitted he didn't have high hopes that he would see a refund anytime soon. His company had paid nearly $100,000 in tariffs that are now deemed illegal. "We're thinking we might get it back. We might not get it back," he said. "It feels like a very opaque process." The White House did not respond to a request for comment. A spokeswoman for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which manages the tariff refund process, declined to make officials available for an interview. At the heart of the matter is the ever-changing slate of so-called reciprocal tariffs that Mr. Trump imposed last year using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. No president before him had ever used the 1977 law to apply tariffs, prompting the Supreme Court to rule against Mr. Trump in February. The decision ended Mr. Trump's most nimble and potent trade power, which he had used for a vast array of purposes, from fighting illegal drugs to protecting political allies abroad. While the government has lost trade cases in the past and has been forced to refund money as a result, the repayment process now awaiting Mr. Trump is unlike any in recent history. By the administration's own count, there were more than 330,000 importers by March that had paid IEEPA duties on more than 53 million entries. The government estimates that it amassed more than $166 billion in revenue from those taxes on imports. That outstanding balance is expected to accrue roughly an additional $650 million in interest each month, or about $22 million per day, according to Scott Lincicome, the Vice President for General Economics at the libertarian-leaning Cato Institute. The fiscal stakes alone prompted Mr. Trump to assert throughout the legal battle that a loss could tip the government into a Great Depression, a claim that economists widely rejected. Once the Supreme Court ruled against him, his administration then tried to slow the process until the Court of International Trade intervened in March and ordered the government to return the money to the importers. The trade court's order appeared to set off a scramble among federal customs officials to put together a digital process for handling a crush of requests, according to the legal filings. Those filings also revealed the technical challenges that the Trump administration faced in trying to return the money. Among the many obstacles, the Trump administration said it had to stand up an entirely new system that could process refunds in bulk and disentangle illegal tariffs from legal ones on those same goods. At first, the government didn't even have a way to deposit money directly into the bank accounts of most importers, customs officials said. As a result, the refund system that debuted on Monday, known as CAPE, can only process imports only at a certain point of the duty-paying process. That covers about 63% of import entries subject to IEEPA tariffs. The government previously said, though it plans to expand the system soon. In its prior public guidance, Customs said it expected it would take 60 to 90 days to issue a refund once it accepts an importer's filing. Kate Hilferty, who oversees the trade practice at the law firm Morgan Lewis, described the refund process as novel and complex, adding that she would be pleasantly surprised if refunds were paid as quickly as the government said. But she added, given the scale of the operation, I would not be surprised if there are technical glitches or other processing errors that occur. Some small business owners seemed especially pessimistic, particularly after weathering a year of ever-changing tariff pressures from Washington. I wouldn't say I'm at all optimistic that they are going to come in a timely manner, said Casey Abel, the founder and chief executive of Wild Rye, which produces outdoor wear for women. Her company also participated in the We Pay the Tariffs coalition that has opposed the president. Ms. Abel said she was expecting about $250,000 in refunds plus interest. Even if they are able to recoup their tariffs, the largest U.S. companies are likely to face pressure to share any refunds with customers who have seen prices rise as a result of Mr. Trump's duties. At least one company, FedEx, has already said it would try to return the money to customers. The shipping giant is frequently listed as the importer of record, but it passes along the duties owed to the customers and companies that purchase the goods. Another company, Costco, has signaled it could pass on the benefit of any refunds received to shoppers, potentially in the form of lower prices. Yet the buy-in-bulk retailer still faces a new class action lawsuit from shoppers who believe it should give the money directly back to customers. Alex Durante, a senior economist at the Tax Foundation, a nonprofit that generally favors lower taxes, said he did not expect businesses to exhibit an immediate urge to pass all that back to consumers. For one thing, he said, many companies are bracing for the president to finalize a set of new tariffs to replace those that the Supreme Court invalidated. That, he explained, would probably also limit businesses from spending much of their refunds on hiring or production, neutering any economic impact. They're still in a world of uncertainty, Mr. Durante said of businesses, adding that the dynamic hasn't shifted so much. To impose his replacement tariffs, the Trump administration has opened investigations into dozens of other countries' trade practices under a provision of the 1974 Trade Act. Those inquiries are expected to result in tariffs similar in magnitude to those that the Supreme Court struck down. Mr. Trump has already applied a temporary 10% tariff on most imports using another section of the 1974 law. Small businesses and states have once again challenged Mr. Trump over his use of the latter authority, known as Section 122. The companies in that case are represented by the Liberty Justice Center, the legal group that prevailed against Mr. Trump over his IEEPA duties at the Supreme Court. Sarah Albright, the chairman of the center, sounded optimistic before Monday that the refunds could proceed at a good pace. But, she added, it would not undo the damage done to businesses since Mr. Trump announced his tariffs at the event he labeled Liberation Day last April. It still doesn't address the harm that small businesses endured over the past year, Ms. Albright said, explaining that the layoffs and other cuts that firms had to make mean they are not going to be made whole. Pakistan's leaders try to contain rising anger over Iran war at home. With deep spiritual ties to Iran, Pakistan's minority Shiites are angry about the killing of Iran's top clerics in U.S.-Israeli strikes, complicating Pakistan's role as mediator. While Pakistan has become the central mediator between the United States and Iran in negotiations to end the war, its leaders are scrambling to contain the fallout of the conflict at home. On March 18th, just days before Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir emerged as the main interlocutor between the United States and Iran, he summoned Pakistan's leading Shiite clerics for a meeting. News of the killing of Iran's supreme leader, who is also a spiritual guide for many Shiites worldwide, had set off unrest in parts of Pakistan, and the meeting was widely seen as an attempt to prevent the violence from spreading further. Violence in Pakistan on the basis of incidents occurring in another country will not be tolerated, the field marshal warned the clerics, according to the military's media wing. Some clerics who attended the meeting described it as tense and said they felt their loyalty to Pakistan had been questioned. Others said his remarks, suggesting that those loyal to Iran should leave Pakistan, had been misinterpreted, and they gave the army chief credit for trying to restore order. But while Pakistan's diplomacy has won praise from President Trump and leaders across the region, the sense of grievance has only deepened among Pakistan's estimated 35 million Shiites, a minority often targeted by militant violence. The war in Iran has become a major domestic issue, second only to sky-high fuel prices and prolonged electricity outages, with officials worried that the conflict would reignite sectarian violence and tarnish Pakistan's new image as a peacemaker. Already, the war in Iran has raised tense questions of loyalty and identity for many Shiites, a minority group among Pakistan's 250 million people. Some adhere to a doctrine known as Wilayat al-Faqih, which grants Iran's supreme leader transnational religious and political authority over Shiites. "We are Pakistani," said Syed Ali Awais, 30, a Shiite activist who attended a March 1st demonstration in which protesters stormed the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan's largest city, where 11 people were killed. "But when our religious leaders are attacked, silence is not an option," he added, "and when we mourn, we receive bullets." He said that a friend, Saeed Adil Zaidi, had been among the victims. Across Shiite communities in Karachi and around the country, in rallies and private gatherings, clerics and activists have been mourning Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and pledging allegiance to Mahatma Khamenei, his son and successor. Shiite clerics have increasingly framed the conflict in Iran as a religious war, drawing parallels to the 7th century Battle of Karbala, a defining episode in Shiite history. Syed Fatima Batul grew up listening to Mr. Khamenei's speeches, and his portrait was a constant presence in her family's home, along neighborhood streets, and inside places of worship scattered across the city. "He may have been the head of state in Iran," said Ms. Batul, 25, a physician, "but I, like millions of other Shiite Muslims, chose him as my religious and moral guide." At a gathering in a mosque in a Shiite neighborhood of Karachi on April 1st, clerics addressed a crowd waving Pakistani and Iranian flags, declaring their readiness to sacrifice their lives for Mr. Khamenei's cause. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Speaking after Field Marshal Munir's warning, the clerics appeared to choose their words carefully, condemning Israel and the United States, but avoiding any mention of Pakistan's role in the negotiations. Khamenei's martyrdom has not weakened us. It has united us against global tyranny, said Alama Bakir Zaidi, a cleric. The crowds greeted his remarks with chants of death to America and death to Israel. The current Iran conflict is reigniting faded anti-Americanism, said Bilal Jalani, head of the research firm Gallup Pakistan. He noted that such sentiment has subsided after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. But after Ayatollah Khamenei's killing, Shiite clerics in the Gilgit-Baltistan, a popular tourist region in Pakistan, announced a ban on American visitors. Many Pakistani Shiites have also been angered by the country's recent diplomacy. Pakistan has joined Mr. Trump's Board of Peace and deployed troops to Saudi Arabia under a joint defense agreement. On April 11th, Pakistan's capital hosted Vice President J.D. Vance and a delegation of Iranian negotiators trying to reach a ceasefire agreement. On Thursday, Mr. Trump floated the possibility of coming to Islamabad if a deal is reached, praising Pakistan's leaders in a social media post as fantastic people. Trump's praise is meaningless when most people at home reject the U.S. and its wars in Iran and elsewhere, said Bakir Karbali, 35, a Shiite and software engineer. He said that there was a clear disconnect between the government's foreign policy and public sentiment. And while the unrest that followed Ayatollah Khamenei's killing has calmed, Pakistani officials said they feared that if the war is prolonged, Shiite groups in Pakistan might be reactivated, causing a resurgence of sectarian violence. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Iranian outreach to Pakistan's Shiites alarmed Gulf rivals, fueling an Iran-Saudi proxy conflict that drove sectarian militancy across Pakistan in the 1990s. Alex Vatanka, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, said that unlike its approach in Lebanon or Iraq, Iran prioritizes stable bilateral ties with Pakistan, carefully avoiding actions that appear as overt sectarian interference. In 2024, Pakistan banned the Zain Bayun Brigade, a Shiite group believed to be backed by Iran. The group was accused of recruiting Pakistani Shiites to join the forces of Bashar al-Assad, Syria's ousted ruler, to protect holy shrines in Syria and carry out attacks on rival Sunni clerics inside Pakistan. Many Shiites view Iran as a protector against violence by Sunni militant groups. The Islamic State killed at least 33 Shiites in 2 attacks this year. Although Pakistan has so far contained further violence by Shiite groups, a Karachi-based counterterrorism official who spoke on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak to the media, warned that prolonged turmoil, particularly strikes on top clerics and holy sites in Iran, could drive Shiite youth toward militancy. These individuals might target American interests in Pakistan or join conflicts abroad in defense of Iran, which they see as the sole Shiite holy state, the official said. Across Shiite neighborhoods in Karachi, portraits of Mojtaba Khomeini now hang alongside those of his father and other leaders, signaling that many followers see as continuity rather than rupture. For Ms. Batul and others who adhere to Wilayat al-Faqih, his ascent represents a spiritual succession, not merely a political one. He provides a form of guidance they believe will endure until the return of the Mahdi, the messianic figure in Shiite belief expected to establish global justice. You cannot measure this in borders or governments, Ms. Batul said. For us, it is a faith that continues no matter what changes around it. U.S. and Iran peace talks appear on track to resume. With the 2-week ceasefire almost over, Vice President J.D. Vance was expected to head to Pakistan on Tuesday for the second round of negotiations. Despite trading threats and issuing mixed messages in recent days, both the United States and Iran indicated on Monday that they plan to take part in another round of peace talks in Pakistan this week. Vice President J.D. Vance was expected to leave Washington for Islamabad, Pakistan's capital, on Tuesday, according to 2 U.S. officials. Iran did not publicly commit to talks, but 2 senior Iranian officials said that Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, who attended the last round of negotiations, would attend again if Mr. Vance did. The possibility of further talks came as Iran threatened to retaliate for the seizure of U.S. forces of an Iranian cargo ship near the Strait of Hormuz on Sunday. Iran's armed forces called it piracy and warned that they would soon retaliate, according to Tasnim, a semi-official Iranian news agency. The U.S. Navy has now turned back 27 ships heading for or leaving Iranian ports, according to the United States Central Command, as an American blockade enters its second week. Only 3 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz on Monday as traffic in the economically crucial waterway slowed to a near halt, according to Kepler, a company that tracks maritime traffic. President Trump said on social media on Monday that if Iran's new leader, regime change, are smart, Iran can have a great and prosperous future. Masoud Pezeshkian, Iran's president, noted the deep historical mistrust between Iran and the United States, but said that war would serve neither country's interests. Iranian officials have publicly expressed skepticism about the prospects for a diplomatic breakthrough as a 2-week ceasefire with the United States nears expiration on Wednesday. Iranian officials do not see any serious sign of U.S. commitment to a deal, a spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry, Esmail Baghai, said at a news conference in Tehran on Monday. It is not possible to speak of advancing diplomacy in its real and conventional sense, he said. Yet Iranian officials have been careful not to rule out talks. Just hours after Mr. Baghai spoke at the news conference, Mr. Pezeshkian made an appeal for reason and calm. While standing firm against injustice and excessive demands, we must bear in mind that continuing the conflict benefits no one, he said. Not us, not the other side, and not the future of the region or the generations to come. 2 senior Iranian officials then said Mr. Ghalibaf was planning to lead a delegation to Islamabad if Mr. Vance went. Given the long flight from Washington to Pakistan, Mr. Ghalibaf would have time to wait before deciding whether to board a plane. The mixed messages reflected a wariness among Iranian officials, experts said, about the prospects for a lasting peace agreement with the United States. Iran's leadership is contending with 2 main sources of pressure, said Hamidreza Azizi, an expert on Iranian security issues at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, a research group based in Berlin. One comes from Iranian hardliners emboldened by having so far survived the U.S.-Israeli onslaught that began at the end of February. They have organized demonstrations across Iran at which supporters wave rifles and chant against surrender. They have a core support base of the Islamic Republic, which is a very hardline and ideological and is very sensitive to any sign of a concession that they would immediately interpret as capitulation, Mr. Azizi said. The other pressure, of course, he said, is Donald Trump and his apparent willingness to stick to his coercive diplomatic strategy. Mr. Azizi pointed to what happened over the weekend after Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced that Iran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Mr. Araghchi immediately came under criticism from media affiliated to Iran's powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Then less than an hour later, Mr. Trump said the U.S. naval blockade against Iran would continue. The next day, Iranian forces reimposed their own blockade. I think the Iranians really do want a deal, but Trump is just too crude. He just wants total victory in public. said Mohammed Ali Sabani, the editor of Amwaj.media, a regional news outlet, and the Iranians feel like time is on their side. Some Iranian officials remain deeply concerned that they could come under attack amid the talks, or that Mr. Trump could return to full-fledged war, said Sasan Karimi, a political scientist at the University of Tehran and a former vice president for strategy in the Iranian government. Negotiators do not even know whether they could be attacked or not when they're in the air, he said. But there are also broader concerns. They don't want to fall into a trap, and they don't want to have pressurized negotiations, whether that is by limiting the time or by setting preconditions, Mr. Karimi said. The Iranians in those circumstances would prefer war. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From pulpits to pews, Trump and the Pope are on the minds of Catholics. At churches with connections to Pope Leo and the Trump administration, pastors and parishioners speak out on the quarrel between the president and the pontiff. Pope Leo XIV's first Easter address called for peace and dialogue in a time of war in the Middle East. He got the dialogue all right, in the form of an ongoing back and forth with the White House over who gets to weigh in on politics and whether war can be righteous. On this day of celebration, let us abandon every desire for conflict, domination, and power, and implore the Lord to grant His peace to a world ravaged by wars. The first U.S.-born pontiff told tens of thousands of people who packed St. Peter's Square on April 5th. Mr. Trump called the pontiff weak on crime, accusing him of catering to the radical left. The president posted an image created by artificial intelligence of himself as a Jesus figure and also said the Pope owed his papacy to Mr. Trump. He later deleted the image, saying he had thought it depicted him as a doctor. Vice President J.D. Vance, who is the highest-ranking Catholic in federal government, has taken the side of his boss. The vice president said on Fox News that the Pope should stick to matters of, what's going on in the Catholic Church, and leave the public policy to Mr. Trump. Around the country, at Catholic churches where Mr. Vance and the Pope have roots, reporters for the New York Times asked worshipers what they thought of the dispute. Cincinnati. Back in 2019, St. Gertrude Church in Cincinnati got frequent visits from a young man curious about Catholicism and politics. He was Mr. Vance, then a 35-year-old venture capitalist who was raised in the evangelical church but considered himself an atheist at the time. Mr. Vance has said he was drawn to the Catholic Church's ancient teachings. On Sunday, the church service at St. Gertrude featured colorful vestments, incense, a traditional homily, and plenty of squirming children, but there was no mention from the altar of the dispute. Joe Schmidt, 46, a local parishioner, said the parish community was theologically conservative but tried to avoid politics. He added that he was glad the Pope had spoken out about Mr. Trump's threats to destroy Iranian civilization. "We always want peace," he said. The Reverend Reginald Haffer, the parochial vicar, said he did not want to weigh in on the back and forth. "I don't really follow the news," he said. "I'm too busy running the church." Villanova University. There was far more discussion about the dispute at the university where Pope Leo, then Robert Prevost, earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics in 1977. The student body at the school outside Philadelphia leans to the left, and in 2024 voted for Kamala Harris over Mr. Trump by a 2-to-1 margin, according to the student newspaper, The Villanovan. Reverend Peter Donahue, the university's president, touched on the disagreement in his homily without calling anybody out by name. Father Donahue likened the back and forth to Luke 24, verses 13 through 35, which tells the story of two disciples of Jesus so engaged in conversation about the news of his crucifixion that they failed to recognize Jesus himself as he met them along a road and spoke of Scripture. Father Donahue implored his congregation to similarly not get wrapped up in the news, but instead to turn to gospel for answers. Hope DiGiovanni, 22, a senior from New Jersey, said she was happy that Pope Leo was taking a stand on current issues and standing up for the faith. Max DeMori, a freshman from Massachusetts, said that when a teacher in a freshman humanities course started a discussion about the exchange between the president and the pontiff, his classmates appeared uniformly opposed to Mr. Trump's statements. Students were particularly turned off by the president's posting the image likening himself to Jesus, Mr. DeMori said. The reactions were definitely like, who would do something like that, he added. Chicago. At Holy Name Cathedral, the mother church of the Archdiocese of Chicago, where Pope Leo grew up, the Reverend Louis Camelli addressed the dispute head-on at the Saturday evening Mass. The church doesn't offer policies or strategies or directions on how to govern, he said. The church offers a vision of values that respect life. Those values, that's what the Holy Father is reminding all of us about. Sam Turner, a 49-year-old physician from Virginia who attended the Mass while visiting Chicago, said he thought that most of Mr. Trump's policies aligned with the Catholic Church, citing the push to limit abortion rights in particular. I think he does make some Catholics scratch their heads, but overall his policies are supportive and align with church teachings, Mr. Turner said. On Sunday morning at Christ Our Savior Catholic Parish in suburban South Holland, Illinois, which bills itself as the de facto home parish of Pope Leo XIV, the dispute was on the minds of several parishioners. Mary Anwuna, a 6-year-old nurse, called the president's criticisms of the Pope ridiculous and said she appreciated that the Pope had not gone quiet. He's not going to succumb to the president, she said. What we know about the killing of 8 children in Louisiana. The shooting rampage on Sunday also left 2 adults wounded. A man killed 8 children, 7 of whom were his own, and wounded 2 adults in Shreveport, Louisiana on Sunday before dying in a confrontation with the police, officials said. The killings left relatives, friends, and city officials struggling to process the devastating toll. Mayor Tom Arsenault of Shreveport described the killings in a news conference as maybe the worst tragic situation we've ever had. The police have offered a possible motive, and their investigation is ongoing. Here's what we know about the killings. What happened? The killings occurred during a shooting rampage that spanned at least 3 locations in the city in northwestern Louisiana, the police said. Officers responded to a report of a shooting just after 6 a.m. at one residence. Later, they said there was another crime scene at a second residence. The children who were killed ranged in age from 3 to 11, officials said, adding that there were 3 boys and 5 girls. They were identified by the coroner for Cato Parish as Jayla Elkins, 3, Shayla Elkins, 5, Kayla Pugh, 6, Layla Pugh, 7, Marcaden Pugh, 10, Soraya Snow, 11, Ketterian Snow, 6, and Braylon Snow, 5. The police identified the gunman as Shamar Elkins, 31, and said he was the father of 7 of the 8 dead children. Mr. Elkins also shot and wounded 2 other adults, including his wife, Shaniqua Pugh, who was hospitalized with life-threatening injuries, the police said. After the shootings, Mr. Elkins carjacked a vehicle and police officers pursued him before opening fire, officials said. It was unclear if officers killed Mr. Elkins or if he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Who was the gunman? Mr. Elkins' relatives said he worked for UPS. Willie Vasher, who used to work at UPS with Mr. Elkins, said in an interview with The Times that his children had been friends with the Elkins children. The only thing that stuck out to him about Mr. Elkins was that he often appeared stressed, he said. The Army said in a statement that Mr. Elkins had served in the Louisiana Army National Guard from August 2013 to August 2020 as a signal support system specialist and a fire support specialist. He did not deploy overseas and left the Army as a private. Records show that Mr. Elkins had at least 2 prior criminal convictions, including for driving while intoxicated in 2016 and for illegal use of weapons in 2019. In a police description of the March 2019 incident, an officer wrote that Mr. Elkins had pulled a 9mm handgun out of his waistband and shot at a vehicle 5 times after the driver of the car had pulled a handgun on him. One of the bullets that Mr. Elkins fired was found near a school where children were playing outside, the officer said. What did the gunman's family say about him? Mr. Elkins had expressed suicidal thoughts recently, according to family members who spoke with the Times. On Easter Sunday, Mr. Elkins called his mother, Mahalia Elkins, and his stepfather, Marcus Jackson, who live in Oklahoma. Miss Elkins and Mr. Jackson said in interviews that their son sounded despondent. They said they could hear his children playing in the background during the call. Mr. Elkins told them through tears that he wanted to take his own life. He told Mr. Jackson that they might be getting a divorce and that he was drowning in dark thoughts. Records show that Mr. Elkins and his wife married in 2024. I told him, "You can beat stuff, man. I don't care what you're going through. You can beat it," Mr. Jackson said. Then I remember him telling me, "Some people don't come back from their demons." The tilt. Why a Democratic Senate, once unthinkable, is a real possibility. Helped by a favorable national environment and strong candidate recruitment, Democrats are tied or ahead in 4 Republican-held seats, polls show. At the start of the 2026 election cycle, the Senate looked far out of reach for the Democrats. The House always seemed competitive, but retaking the Senate would require flipping at least 4 Republican-held seats, including at least 2 seats in states that President Trump won by double digits in 2024. In today's polarized era, Democrats would need everything to break their way. So far, everything is breaking the Democrats' way. With Mr. Trump's approval rating falling and inflation rising, along with the uncertainty of a war in the Middle East, it's not hard to imagine a Democratic tsunami in November. A blue wave is not guaranteed, of course, and Democrats would not be assured to flip 2 reliably Republican states, even if it were. But a feasible path for the party to win the Senate is coming into focus. In recent polls, Democrats appear tied or ahead in 4 Republican-controlled seats, the number they would need to take the Senate. These include Maine and North Carolina, where the likely Democratic nominees hold clear leads, as well as Ohio and Alaska, where Democrats have recruited strong candidates in states Mr. Trump won by double digits in 2024. There are also signs that Republicans could be in danger in 2 more states where Mr. Trump won by double digits, Iowa and Texas. Over the last few weeks, the betting markets have shifted to make the Senate a toss-up, though some analysts haven't gone quite so far. Whether the Senate is a toss-up or not, it's clearly competitive, and that's something that might have been hard to imagine a year ago. In the Trump era, Democratic Senate candidates haven't had much success at winning in red states. They failed to flip vigorously contested seats in Texas, Tennessee, and Montana in 2018 and 2020. And most Democratic red state incumbents, including those in Florida, Indiana, North Dakota, and Missouri, lost re-election. Today, every Democrat in the Senate represents a state that voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Looking even further back, no party has managed to flip 2 states that lean so much toward the other party since 2008. Only one such seat, Illinois in 2010, was flipped in a regularly scheduled election. 2 more flipped in memorable special elections, Massachusetts 2010 and Alabama 2017. Most of these victories took extraordinary circumstances, like a criminal conviction, a child molestation allegation, or a bank seizure. This time, Democrats aren't benefiting from anything as unusual as a criminal conviction. Instead, they're counting on a favorable national political environment, strong candidates, and the possibility that several of these states may not be quite as Republican-leaning as they seem. Strong tailwinds. Let's start with the national environment. There's no doubt that the political winds are at the party's back and might get stronger. The easiest measure is Mr. Trump's approval rating, which has fallen to 40%, with 56% disapproving, according to our average. That's lower than his rating during the 2018 campaign, when Democrats won the combined national House popular vote by 7 percentage points. It's also lower than Bill Clinton's approval rating in 1994 or Barack Obama's approval rating during 2010 and 2014, when Republicans won sweeping midterm victories. It's pretty similar to George W. Bush's approval rating in November 2006, when Democrats dominated. Even if Mr. Trump successfully negotiates a quick end to the war in Iran, it will be hard for his standing to improve much by November. His ratings have been in steady decline for about a year, and the war has only added to the weight of persistent inflation. If the conflict isn't resolved quickly, the risks are enormous. Historically, quagmire abroad and rising prices at home are the ingredients of a failed presidency. There's one reason to question whether the national political environment is as good for Democrats as it seems. They lead by only 5 or 6 points on the so-called generic congressional ballot, which asks voters which party they'll support for Congress. This is a sizable lead, but it's smaller than the Democrats' edge at this point during the 2006 or 2018 cycle. These polls, however, generally reflect the opinions of all adults or registered voters, not the smaller group of voters who turn out in midterms. Democrats clearly have an enormous advantage among these highly engaged voters. In recent special elections, Democrats have significantly outperformed Kamala Harris's 2024 showings. For good measure, there's a long-standing tendency for the generic ballot polling to drift toward the party out of power. To the extent Democrats are held back by the party's national brand on a generic question, strong candidates with their own distinct brands might be better positioned to capitalize. Strong recruitment. If there's a single reason Democrats have a realistic chance to win the Senate, it's that they recruited unusually strong candidates in 3 states that supported Mr. Trump 3 times: North Carolina, Ohio, and Alaska. In all 3 states, the Democrats' likely nominees are popular recent statewide office holders. They either won their latest campaign or were highly competitive in losing re-election under less favorable political conditions. So far, the polls show those Democrats running well ahead of what one might otherwise expect. In light red to purple North Carolina, the former Governor Roy Cooper's decision to run for the Senate might turn the contest into a snoozer. He won comfortable re-election as governor in 2020, even as Mr. Trump carried the state, and he's running against a candidate, Michael Whatley, a former chairman of the Republican National Committee, who has never held office. The polls taken since the primary show Mr. Cooper ahead by 3 to 14 points. Perhaps more significant are the candidacies of the former Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio and the former House member Mary Peltola in Alaska. Their entries into the race are certainly more unusual. The minority party doesn't usually have many strong candidates in states that lean heavily toward the other party. It would be fortunate for Democrats to have even one established candidate in a red state, let alone one for both Alaska and Ohio. Ms. Peltola and Mr. Brown lost re-election in 2024, but their strong showings make it easy to imagine how they could prevail in this year's more favorable political environment. In Ohio, Mr. Brown lost by 3.6 points in 2024. Ms. Peltola lost by around 2 points in Alaska. Today, the Democrats are faring about 8 points better on the generic congressional ballot than they did in the 2024 combined U.S. congressional popular vote. Or put another way, Mr. Brown and Ms. Peltola probably would have won re-election in 2024 if those contests had been held in this political environment. There haven't been many polls in either state, but every recent poll in Alaska shows Ms. Peltola ahead. Every poll in Ohio shows a very close race. Then there's Maine. Democrats did recruit a candidate with demonstrated statewide appeal, Governor Janet Mills, but she trails in the Democratic primary against Graham Plattner, a first-time candidate and veteran running as a populist progressive. In recent polls, he leads Ms. Mills by a staggering 2-to-1 margin or even more. In a blue state like Maine, Mr. Plattner's progressive bona fides are not necessarily a disadvantage, even against an electoral juggernaut like the Republican moderate Susan Collins. A lengthy trail of provocative online comments and a now covered tattoo that resembled a Nazi symbol might be expected to be bigger liabilities. But perhaps surprisingly, Mr. Plattner still holds a clear lead in the polls against Ms. Collins in the general election. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Texas and Iowa. Even with Alaska and Ohio in play, and with North Carolina and perhaps Maine looking favorable, the Democrats' path to control of the Senate is still daunting. To win, they would need to go 4 for 4 in those Republican-held seats while defending seats in Georgia, Michigan, and New Hampshire. It's hard to argue that Democrats are even money favorites to take the Senate if they need to go 7 for 7. Enter Iowa and Texas. On paper, it's not obvious that either state ought to be competitive. Even in this political environment, Mr. Trump won them by a slightly bigger margin than he did in Alaska and Ohio, and Democrats don't have well-established candidates. By the numbers, these states seem like Florida, which isn't as serious an option for Democrats. But for different reasons, Democrats can still picture a victory in Texas and Iowa. Texas has the clearer case. While Mr. Trump won the state by 14 points, the Lone Star may not be as red as it seems. In 2020, Texas voted for Mr. Trump by just 5.6 points. His double-digit victory in 2024 was built on enormous gains among non-white voters who have snapped back to the Democrats in recent polls. That would send Texas zooming back toward the left, and in this national environment, into contention. In the state primary in March, more voters cast ballots for Democrats than Republicans. The Republican position could weaken further if the incumbent, John Cornyn, loses the primary runoff to Ken Paxton, the state attorney general and a conservative firebrand. The polls don't show Mr. Paxton performing that much worse than Mr. Cornyn against the Democratic nominee, James Tallarico, but Mr. Paxton brings distinct liabilities, including a lengthy FBI bribery investigation. No charges were brought. Iowa, on the other hand, is one of the whitest states in the country. A reversion among non-white voters there won't do much to help Democrats. The Democrats don't have a high-profile candidate, and the likely Republican nominee, Representative Ashley Hinson, is a solid candidate. But Iowa has a case of its own. While it didn't swing disproportionately toward Mr. Trump in 2024, only North Dakota swung more toward Mr. Trump in 2016. It's possible that Iowa's relatively moderate white working-class voters might still be open to swinging back in a Democratic-leaning national environment. In the 2018 midterm elections, Democrats actually won the House popular vote in Iowa, something they did not come close to achieving in any of the other red states we've mentioned. Democrats are expected to be highly competitive in the state's race for governor. The presumptive nominee is the state auditor, Rob Sand, who won statewide in 2018 and 2022. And Mr. Trump's tariffs have hit this agricultural state hard. Democrats don't have many serious options beyond Texas and Iowa. Nebraska, where the independent Dan Osborne is running, again, seems unlikely so long as Democrat is on the ballot. But even without another long-shot state, competitive races in Iowa and Texas would give Democrats breathing room. If a blue wave materializes, Democrats have a chance to ride it to Senate control. FBI director sues The Atlantic over article claiming excessive drinking. Mr. Patel accused the publication of defamation, asking for $250 million in damages. A spokeswoman for The Atlantic called the suit meritless. The FBI director, Kash Patel, sued The Atlantic on Monday, accusing it of defamation over an article that claimed his excessive drinking and unexplained absences were putting his job in jeopardy. The article, under the headline, "The FBI Director is MIA," was published on Friday and detailed Mr. Patel's behavior in his role leading the Federal Bureau of Investigation, citing more than 24 anonymous sources. The author, Sarah Fitzpatrick, wrote that Mr. Patel's conduct had often alarmed officials at the FBI and the Department of Justice. The article said he has also earned a reputation for acting impulsively during high-stakes investigations. Mr. Patel denied the claims in a statement to The Atlantic, which the article included. The White House also denied the claims, with Carolyn Leavitt, its press secretary, telling The Atlantic that Director Patel remains a critical player on the administration's law and order team. Mr. Patel immediately began threatening a lawsuit, which was filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia against both The Atlantic and Ms. Fitzpatrick. The suit seeks $250 million in damages. A spokeswoman for The Atlantic said on Monday that the publication stood by its reporting. We will vigorously defend The Atlantic and our journalists against this meritless lawsuit, she said in a statement. In his complaint, Mr. Patel accused the defendants of publishing an article replete with false and obviously fabricated allegations designed to destroy Director Patel's reputation and drive him from office. He pushed back on allegations that he drinks to the point of obvious intoxication at places like the members-only clubs, Ned's, in Washington, and the Poodle Room in Las Vegas. Director Patel does not drink to excess at these establishments or anywhere else, and this has not, and has never been, a source of concern across the government, the complaint said. Mr. Patel also said in the suit that The Atlantic had published the article despite being expressly warned hours before publication that the central allegations were categorically false. He said in his suit that the FBI had been given less than 2 hours to comment on a list of 19 claims provided by The Atlantic, and that his legal counsel had sent the publication a letter refuting the claims, asking for more time to respond and demanding the article not be published. Mr. Patel, as a public figure, must meet a higher standard than an ordinary citizen to prove his case. He must show not only that there were falsehoods in the article, but also actual malice, a legal standard that means that the defendants published defamatory material either while knowing it was false or with reckless disregard as to its truth. The lawsuit is the latest in a series from the Trump administration against media outlets over unfavorable reporting. Last week, a federal judge dismissed President Trump's complaint against the Wall Street Journal over a birthday message to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, though Mr. Trump may refile that suit. The president has also filed lawsuits in recent months against the New York Times, the BBC, CNN, and the Des Moines Register. Oil prices jump and stocks waver on renewed Iran conflict. Oil prices shot higher and stocks wobbled on Monday after a weekend of renewed conflict around the Strait of Hormuz dampened hope that the waterway might soon reopen. On Sunday, a U.S. Navy destroyer attacked and seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship that President Trump said had tried to evade the U.S. blockade on ships traveling to and from Iranian ports. And on Saturday, a day after Iran's foreign minister declared the strait open, the country reversed course, reasserting strict control over it and attacking 2 Indian-flagged vessels. This is set to be a pivotal week in the war, now in its 8th week, with the ceasefire between the United States and Iran set to expire within days. Mr. Trump said the United States was sending a delegation to Pakistan for further negotiations with Iran, though it was not clear that Iran was on board. Oil prices climbed. The price of Brent crude, the global benchmark for oil, climbed 5.6% to $95.48 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude, the U.S. benchmark, rose 6.9% to $89.61 a barrel. Investors and analysts are focused on the continued disruption to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Iran and Oman that is a vital trading route for oil and natural gas and normally carries as much as 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Global stocks were mixed. The S&P 500 fell 0.2% on Monday. The index has risen sharply in recent weeks and ended trading on Friday 3.6% higher than before the war began. In Europe, the Stoxx 600, a broad index that tracks the region's largest companies, fell 0.8%. But stocks in Asia where countries import vast quantities of oil and gas, posted gains. South Korea's benchmark Kospi, Hong Kong's Hang Seng, and Japan's Nikkei 225 rose a bit less than 1%. Gasoline prices fell. Gas prices fell on Monday to a national average of $4.04 a gallon, according to the AAA Motor Club. That is down from a recent high of $4.17 earlier in April. Still, drivers are paying about 36% more for gas than they were when the war began. Diesel prices also stood at $5.53 on Monday, up 47% since the start of the war. Gas prices don't move in lockstep with crude, usually trailing increases or drops by a few days. On Sunday, Energy Secretary Chris Wright acknowledged what analysts widely have been predicting, that Americans are unlikely to see gasoline prices return to pre-war levels anytime soon. What they are saying, a potent risk of attack will keep ship traffic low. Around the Strait of Hormuz, shippers will hold off on attempting passage due to the potent risk of Iranian attack, analysts at Eurasia Group wrote in a note. They expected shipping volumes to remain low, at up to 30% of normal at the high end. Reopening the waterway would require a breakthrough in peace talks between the United States and Iran. While the U.S. is projecting confidence that a deal can be reached, signals from the Iranian side are more pessimistic, the analysts wrote. Both sides are attempting to maximize leverage ahead of further rounds of negotiations, they added. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 21st issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Patty Young. Thank you for listening.